Welcome to Torah Today Ministries and our continuing series Tehillim Talks. And in this episode, we're going to look into the most difficult psalm I've ever done so far, Psalm 68. I have had a real wrestling match with this psalm. I think it's been probably over a month, 6 weeks, since I've recorded a Tehillim Talks episode, and one of the reasons is this psalm. This is just making me pull my hair out, yet at the same time I find it so inspiring and beautiful. Let me just read to you something from Christopher Ash, who did a 4-volume commentary on the book of Psalms. He's an English gentleman, very articulate, with a beautiful commentary, and I think he puts it best. This is how he introduces Psalm 68. He says, the energy of Psalm 68 is extraordinary. Images tumble over one another and echoes reverberate. Derek Kidner calls it, quote, this rushing cataract of a psalm, one of the most boisterous and exhilarating in the Psalter, unquote. And yet it is famously difficult to understand. The puzzles are almost all in the details with many rare words. But the big picture is clear. God wins a victory on behalf of his people. The psalm traces God's triumphant march through the desert, his conquest over the kings of Canaan, and finally his ascension to the holy mount to reign in majesty. That beautifully describes what I've experienced with this psalm. I was talking with Robin just last evening, telling her I finally just have to come and record what I've got for this psalm. I described to her the difficulty I've had wrestling with this. And I told her, I said, it's almost like an impressionist painting. If you're familiar with the impressionist style, it's just made up of blobs of paint on the canvas. So if you're up close, you just see blobs of color. But if you step back from the canvas and kind of squint your eyes, the picture is very clear. And so with this, the more I look into it, the more confusing it is. It's almost impossible to translate. But if you step back and just look at the big picture, you see what was described here by Christopher Ash. It's a beautiful, boisterous, powerful, glorious psalm of how God runs the world. God is on the move. He accomplishes his purpose, and he rules in glory in the end. That much is clear from this psalm. But other than that, the details, well, just good luck. If you want to wrestle with this, I invite you to try. Normally I put a vertical red line to the left of the passages, which are very, very difficult to translate. I could have put a vertical red line down this entire psalm. And let me just say one other little thing about translation. If you're translating a technical manual, fold on line A, put tab B in slot C. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Just technical, just put the right words in. And if you've read Chinese instructions for assembling something, you know what I mean. But then let's say instead of a technical manual, you are translating a story. Now, stories can be written in very toned language with different hues and shades of meaning and color. But the story can still come through regardless of who's translating it. In fact, we even have people who take Shakespearean stories, which can be very difficult to read, 400 years after they're written, and they translate them, so to speak, into modern English. You lose a lot of the beauty, but the story comes through. But then let's say instead of a story, you're going to translate poetry. Now this is much more difficult because good poetry is by nature embedded in the language in which it is composed. And to try to take that beauty and transfer it to a different language, you're just losing something. You can't help it. But then you take ancient Hebrew, spiritual, divinely inspired biblical poetry, especially something as complex as Psalm 68, it's an impossible task. So that's my disclaimer on this teaching. But there are some beautiful things here, and I hope you'll be blessed as we stumble our way through this amazing psalm. So, Psalm 68, strap in, here we go. Its attribution is to the choir master, a psalm of David, a song. This is the fourth in a series of 4 songs. 65, 66, 67, and now 68 have 4 songs, and this is the fourth. Now, I've divided this, as most divide this, into 9 stanzas, and I've put some titles here at the top of each stanza. Other translators and commentators have put other titles. You can make up your own, but these are what I have. I'm not even going to refer to them, but they're there if you want to read them. So here we go, the first 3 verses. God shall arise, let his enemies scatter, and those who hate him flee from before him. Does that sound familiar to you? If you've ever been to a Torah service, you've heard this quoted, but this itself is a quote from Numbers chapter 10, verse 35, which says, Then it came about when the ark set out that Moses said, Rise up, Adonai, let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee from before you. So whenever the Torah is taken out of the ark, that is read. And here David is quoting that passage from Numbers 10. So we see God on the move. And then at the very end of the psalm, we see God coming to rest in glory on his throne. As smoke is driven away, so shall you drive them away. As wax melts before fire, so the wicked perish before God. We find many passages in Scripture where it talks about God demolishing his enemies, causing his enemies to perish, destroying his enemies. But our God is a God of love. His destruction is also done in a loving manner. Now look at the manner in which he destroys his enemies here. It says, as smoke is driven away. Now, how is smoke driven away? It's a matter of having a lot of little particles of ash in the air. And those pieces of ash don't disappear, but they are dispersed. You know, an enemy that's just an individual is not much of a threat. But when there are a lot of enemies who come together and they unite, now you've got a big threat. But when the enemies are scattered, the threat is decreased. And what God does, he takes the strength of the enemy and just scatters it to where each individual one becomes something weak and ineffective. So a smoke is driven away. Smoke blocks the light. And God, with a puff from his mouth, just a breath, the enemy is scattered. We talk about spiritual warfare, but it tells us in the end that the way God destroys his enemy is with the breath of his mouth. Revelation, just he's gone. But look at this next one. As there I go again. As wax melts before fire. As the wax melts. In other words, it loses its form and its shape, but now it can be shaped into something different. Have you ever had your heart melted by God, by his love, by his grace? I have. And then he reshapes it into something new. God does this all the time. So, as smoke is driven away, as wax melts before fire, so the wicked perish before God. This is the process by which God deals with the wicked. Now, the third verse says, but the righteous are happy. They rejoice before God and are jubilant with joy. So there are 4 groups here. We see enemies of God. We see those who hate him. And we see the wicked. But then the 4th group is the righteous. What makes the enemies and the wicked and those who hate him that kind of person? Their relationship to God. What makes the righteous happy? Their relationship with God. So these 4 groups, what happens to them is all based on how they relate to God. And if God is their enemy, they hate what he does, or they're so invested in their own wicked, selfish, sinful ways, or they just they're just lost. But those who know God, the righteous, they rejoice, they're happy. Our relationship to God determines everything about how we will experience him and how we'll experience the world in which he's placed us and the life which he's given us. It's a pretty fascinating passage, just those 4 verses, or those 3 verses. But then we come on to verses 4 through 6. Sing to God, sing praises to his name. Lift up a song to him who rides through the Aravot. I have not even tried translating this word. And in your translation, it may say deserts, or it may say heavens. Here's the word down here, Aravot. And again, you can see it can be translated deserts or clouds in the heavens. The word Arabia comes from this word. The Arava was the hot desert area in the very south of Israel. But in the Jewish mindset, the Hebraic mindset, and as the rabbis wrestle with this passage, they see Aravot in their thinking as also being the heavens. It can apply to that. In fact, in the Talmud, it says the Aravot is the firmament that contains righteousness, justice, the treasures of life, and it goes on to list all these other wonderful things. And one of the reasons I see it this way is because in Deuteronomy 33:26, it says, "There is none like the God of Yeshurun, who rides the heavens to your help, and through the skies is his majesty." Now, the word Aravot is not used in that passage, but they see God as riding in the heavens, riding on the clouds. And so, when it says here, lift up a song to him who rides through the Aravot, they picture in their minds the clouds. Now, again, if I was just translating this strictly literally, I'd have to put deserts there. But I also wanted to give you the flavor of how the Jewish people over the centuries have interpreted this psalm and what they see when they read it as well. And then it says his name is Yah, Yud-He, the first 2 letters of his 4-letter name. His name is Yah, exult before him. Father of the fatherless and protector of widows. Oh, wait a minute. It's talking about how God rides through the heavens. His name is Yah, and sing praises to him, lift up a song to him. It's talking about how glorious our God is. But then what does it do right in the next breath? He's the father of the fatherless and the protector of widows. You see how immediate it goes from this grand picture of his majesty right down to the fatherless and widows? God's majesty and God's humility are completely entangled with one another. And yes, he's the most majestic and glorious God we could possibly imagine, and then some. And yet, his heart is with the fatherless and widows. That's amazing to put those 2 verses right there next to each other. Father of the fatherless and protector of widows is God in his holy habitation. Now, this word habitation is the word ma'on. It's kind of an unusual word. I'm not sure why they would use, or why David would use the word ma'on here, but ma'on is a little different from a house or other words we could use for a habitation or a dwelling place. A ma'on is something where you really feel at home, a place that is like your permanent residence. It's a place where when you're going someplace, it's the place you're going from, it's a place you want to get back to. Ma'on carries with it this sense of permanence. So let me just give you a few ways this is used. I think you'll be blessed by this. In Deuteronomy 26:15, it says, "Look down from your holy ma'on, your holy habitation from heaven, and bless your people Israel in the ground that you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So, praying that God would look down from his abode, his habitation in heaven. Psalm 26:8 says, O Adonai, I love the ma'on, the habitation of your house, and the place where your glory dwells or resides. But then look at Psalm 90, verse 1. Adonai, Lord, you have been our ma'on in all generations. So God has a ma'on, a dwelling place. But for those who are in right relationship with God, God is our ma'on. He's our dwelling place. He's the one from whom we came, and he is the one to whom we return. But also, one more, Psalm 91, verse 9, because you have made Adonai your ma'on, the Most High is my refuge. We get to choose to make God our ma'on, our dwelling place, our habitation, or we choose not to. But if we do choose to make him our dwelling place, he becomes a strong fortress for us. So it's a beautiful word. There's a little bit of an unusual word compared to other words that could be used here. And then it says, God settles the lonely. I like lonely here as the best translation for this word. He settles the lonely into a house. And even though the word here is beit, house, it really infers a family. In Hebraic thought, a house is more than just a place with walls and a ceiling and a roof. It's a place where your family is. I remember the story of I may have shared this before, of a rabbi who was very old. He had lost his wife a few months earlier. And he was in the city, and he got in a taxi. And the taxi driver knew the rabbi and says, Rabbi, would you like me to take you home? And the rabbi says, I no longer have a home. In other words, without his wife there, it was no longer a home. So you can have a house, but in biblical thought, a house is supposed to be a home. And that seems to be the weight of how David intends this word here. So God settles the lonely into a family. What a beautiful, beautiful verse. He leads out the prisoners. Now, you'll notice this passage here is highlighted in kind of a light green color. Wherever you see that in the psalm, that refers to a word, a Hebrew word that appears only once in the Bible, in this psalm. There are a number of these. I've come across four in this psalm, where the word is used nowhere else in the Bible except in this psalm. And so we have to kind of wrestle with it because we don't have the context of how it's used elsewhere. So he leads out the prisoners. It can be in prosperity. It can also mean in fetters. It can also mean in song. Take your pick. We don't know. The word in Hebrew is the word makosharot. And Robert Alter, who's probably one of the best Hebrew translators in the world today, says this, quote, no one knows what it means, unquote. So there you go. So take your pick. It might not even be one of these three. But he leads out the prisoners, but the rebellious dwell in a parched land. You want to be totally alone? Then be a rebel. Sometimes we think rebels bring other rebels around and they rebel together, but a true rebel always winds up being completely alone. Completely alone. Verses 7 through 10. O God, when you go out before your people, when you march through the wilderness, and then there's this Selah here, stuck in the middle of a sentence. The earth quaked, the heavens poured down rain before God, the one of Sinai, before God, the God of Israel. Why is there a Selah stuck right in the middle of a sentence, of a thought? Usually a Selah comes at the end of a stanza, or at least at the end of a verse, but never in the middle of a statement. But here it does. Again, a very odd psalm. Rain in abundance, O God, you shed abroad. You restored your inheritance as it languished. Your flock settled there. In your goodness, O God, you provide for the needy. And that's about the most straightforward stanza in the entire psalm. Verses 11 through 14. My Lord gives the word. The women who announce the good news are a great host. Now, the word women is not there in the Hebrew. What it really says is the announcers of good news are a great host. And the word for announcers of good news, which is all one word, it's the word hambasarut, but from the word basora, which means gospel or good news. It's a feminine word, so we know these are women who are announcing good news. Now, who are the women announcing the good news? Well, it could be Miriam leading the women in song there at the Song of the Sea in Exodus 15. Maybe it's Deborah. There's some other hints to Deborah in this psalm. In Judges 5, when she and Barak won a great victory in battle. So then it has the Song of Deborah, and she's singing with the other women. It could be the women who are singing David's praises when he comes back into town after his victories, 1 Samuel 18. But this is feminine. These are women who are announcing the Basora, the good news. Could it be the bride of Messiah? Because the bride of Messiah, the redeemed community, is referred to as feminine. And we are to be announcers of the good news. Could it be all of these? Could it be all of these in addition to others? Of course. Again, this is like an impressionist painting. It's a kind of an untamed psalm that's filled with this lush imagery. So this large group of women announcing the good news, they're a great host, and they're saying, verse 12, kings of armies, flee, they flee. The beautiful woman at home divides the spoils, and we have no idea that's how that's to be translated or not. We don't know. Were you meant to lie down among the sheepfolds? Now again, this word is highlighted in green, and we don't know if it means sheepfolds or something else. It's the only place in the Bible this word is found. Actually, I take that back. It's found one other place. It's over in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 40, verse 43, and there it's translated hooks, which cannot be what it means here. So it may be two different words that happen to take a form that makes them look the same. We don't know. So I went ahead and highlighted it in green. We simply don't know what the word means. But were you among men to lie among the sheepfolds? And this seems to be the most popular translation of this word. When I read this, I'm thinking of men who come back from battle. And because they've come into contact with dead bodies, they're going to be unclean for a period of time, and so they would sleep outside the camp until they'd gone through the purification rites and could then re-enter the camp. So it might be referring to that. And then you've got this phrase, the wings of a dove covered with silver, its pinions with shimmering gold. What does that mean? It's beautiful, but we don't know what it means. Some have surmised that it's referring to the Israelites coming out of Egypt. These ex-slaves coming out of Egypt with great wealth, like a dove that's escaping a trap, but it's filled with silver and gold as it flees Egypt. That's a beautiful image. Again, this is Hebrew poetry, and it's hard to pin down exactly what it's referring to, but the imagery is quite beautiful. When Shaddai scatters kings there, let snow fall on Zalman. Again, we can see what it's saying, but what does it mean? We don't know. Verses 15 through 18. The mountain of God is a lush mountain. Now, literally it says it's a mountain of Bashan. Bashan is a location in the Middle East. But the word Bashan means lush. If you recall, King Og, the king of the Amorites, he lived in the Bashan. And Bashan means soft, loamy, lush soil. And but I think the best translation here is lush mountain rather than mountain of Bashan. Because the mountain of God is not out in the Bashan, on the east side of the Jordan in the land of the Amorites. The mountain of God is in Jerusalem, So I think lush mountain is the best way to go. So let's read it that way. The mountain of God is a lush mountain. The many-peaked mountain is a lush mountain. Many-peaked mountain. If you've ever been to Jerusalem, you can stand on the Temple Mount or any of the areas right there in Jerusalem. And when you look around you, you'll see higher mountains making a ring all the way around. So it's like you've got the mount that Jerusalem is on, but it's part of a larger mountain with many peaks in a ring, almost like a crown on a head. And this is why it says in Psalm, let me see if I can find it here. Yes, in Psalm 125:2. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so Adonai surrounds his people from this time and forevermore. So there's like this protective range of mountains that go in a circle around the smaller mountain of Jerusalem. You have to be there almost to see it. I tried to find a photograph to include here, but I could find nothing that really captured that. So the mountain of God is a lush mountain. The many-peaked mountain is a lush mountain. Why do you look with hatred, look with envy, exalt yourselves? Notice it's highlighted in green. We do not know what this word means. It is found only here in the scriptures. And for those of you who are curious, the word is shinan. The word is ratzad. Ratzad. So why do you look with hatred? I don't think that's a good translation, but some translators do render it that way. Envy is probably the better, because it says, "Oh, many-peaked mountains, at the mountain that God desired for his abode, yes, where Adonai will dwell forever." So it's almost like these encircling mountaintops are looking down with envy at the shorter mountain, Mount Zion, where the Temple Mount is. And they're envious, or they're dancing. They're dancing in a hora, in a circle, a Hebrew dance around the smaller, more humble mountain of Mount Zion. I think that's the image that's being created here. And then in verse 17, the chariots of God are twice 10,000. Thousands of thousands, or thousands of angels. This word is found only here. The word shinan, only place in the Bible it's found. So we're surmising is what it means. But since it's referring to the chariots of God are twice 10,000, then the thousands of thousands might refer, and probably refers, to angels. So it's a guess, a calculated guess. The Lord is among them at Sinai in the sanctuary. Now, this is something very important. The word here that I've translated sanctuary, and the English Standard Version does as well, is the word Kodesh. So I am going to draw a rectangle around that word sanctuary. And I recommend that if you have your Bibles in front of you, that you somehow highlight that word. Now, the word Kodesh is usually translated holiness. So many translations put Sinai in holiness. The Lord is among them, Sinai in holiness. Or the Lord is among them at Sinai in holiness. But in the book of Numbers, the word Kodesh is translated sanctuary almost 30 times. The word can mean sanctuary. And so I really like the way the English Standard Version has translated this. And instead of one sentence, I think this should be two. The Lord is among them, period. Sinai is in the sanctuary. What an image that is. Now I want you to picture Mount Sinai, okay? We've been reading about it in our Torah portion this week, and Torah portion of Etchanan, early in Deuteronomy. And Moses is rehearsing how they all saw the smoke and the cloud on the mountain. They saw the fire. They heard God's echoing voice like a loud shofar, and the mountain shook. And he spoke forth the 10 words, the 10 commandments, and he makes this covenant with Israel. I mean, can you imagine what that was like. I would love to have been there. And then it says Sinai is in the sanctuary. Moses kept reminding the people in Deuteronomy, you didn't see a form, you didn't see anything except the smoke and the fire, but you didn't see a form, but you heard his voice. Now I want you to think of what the high priest does on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, that's the single day of the year that he is permitted and commanded even to enter into the Holy of Holies, the very heart of the Kodesh, the Mikdash, the sanctuary. And he goes in and out several times during Yom Kippur, but the first time he goes in with a shovel of hot coals and then a pan of incense. And he goes in, he puts the hot coals down, he puts the incense on top, but the entire Holy of Holies is filled with smoke. So there's the fire of the hot coals. The place is filled with smoke. He can see nothing. But God says there in Exodus 25:26, he says it's there on top from above the lid of the Ark of the Covenant that I will speak to you. I'll speak to you, Sham. There's where I speak. It's like recreating Mount Sinai in the Holy of Holies. The massive topography of Mount Sinai is reduced down. The power still remains, even though it's in the small cube of the Holy of Holies. It's an amazing picture. Now we're going to find the word sanctuary 3 times in this psalm. And each time we learn something a little bit different, a little bit more. And I think these 3 uses of the word Kodesh in the psalm give us the key to really seeing the flow and the entire weight and the message of this beautiful psalm. So here's the first one. Sinai is in the Kodesh, in the sanctuary. You ascended on high, leading a host of captives in your train. Paul quotes this verse in Ephesians. In Ephesians 4:8, he says, therefore it says, quote, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives and he gave gifts to men, unquote. So Paul is quoting Psalm 68. I would love to be able to pick Paul's brain, just ask him, how did you understand this psalm? But you ascended on high, leading a host of captives in your train and receiving gifts among men, even among the rebellious that Adonai God made dwell there. Now, why do I have rebellious in red? Because we saw the rebels earlier. The rebels will dwell in a lonely place. But God hasn't forgotten them. They are feeling the absence of God in their lives, but God has not forgotten them. And so we see here in verse 18, he receives gifts from men, even among the rebellious. Somehow, he's bringing them back. 19 through 23, blessed is the Lord, who day by day supplies us. God is our Yeshua, our salvation. Selah. Our God is a God of salvations, of rescues. And to Adonai the Lord belong deliverances from death. Literally it says, to death goings out. Some translate this, has toward death many avenues. Again, you tell me what it means. The rabbis wrestle with this and they draw out all kinds of interesting insights and teachings. And I recommend that you pick up a good rabbinic or a good Christian commentary on Psalm 68 and look at this verse and see how they wrestle with this. Because I think there's something important going on here. It's just above my pay grade. I don't know how to explain it. I don't understand it. Verse 21, but God will strike the heads of his enemies. And that word strike is found here in this verse. It's also found down in the next verse, or 2 verses later in 23. It's the same word. God will strike the heads of his enemies, the hairy crown of him who walks about in his guilt. The Lord said, I will bring them back from Bashan. I will bring them back from the depths of the sea, that you may strike, and there's that word again, your feet in their blood, that the tongues of your dogs may have their portion from the foe. I want to take a moment just to look at that word strike. That word strike in Hebrew is the word machatz. Machatz. The first time it's used is in Numbers 24, verse 8. This is what it says. God brings him out of Egypt and is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries, and shall break their bones in pieces and machatz them through with his arrows. Pierce them is how it's translated. So the machatz doesn't mean just to crush or smash, but to pierce. In Deuteronomy 32:39, I find this is a very interesting use of the word machatz. It says, see now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill, and I make alive. I machatz, and I heal. Again, as we were talking about earlier, when God destroys his enemies, it's not that he annihilates them and takes them out of existence, but to change an enemy into a friend, to wound so that he can heal, to bring distress into someone's life so that they can learn to call out for God's help and God's peace. That's how God deals with enemies. So, let's move on to verse 24. Your procession is seen, O God, the procession of my God, my King, into the sanctuary. Now here again we find the word sanctuary, the Kodesh. Now I'll put a rectangle around it. I recommend you also mark it in your Bibles. So the first time we saw Kodesh, it was Sinai is in the sanctuary. But now it says, your procession is seen, O God, the procession of my God, my King, into the sanctuary. So it's like Sinai was there, and then God came down to the mountain and he spoke to the people through the fire and the smoke. So in the previous appearance of Kodesh, we see Sinai is in the sanctuary. Here we see God coming to Mount Sinai in the sanctuary. The singers in front, the musicians last, between them virgins playing tambourines. So this is a very musical procession. At the first Sinai experience, there was the sound of the shofar growing louder and louder and louder. And it was a terrifying experience. But this coming to Mount Sinai is a very joyful one. We don't see fear here, but rejoice and enjoy and music and dancing. And what are they singing? Verse 26, bless God in the great congregation, Adonai, O you who are of Israel's fountain, unquote. And then it says, there is Benjamin, the least of them. Or you could say the littlest of them, in the lead. Benjamin was Jacob's 12th son. So he was the smallest, little Benjamin. But here he is in the lead. This might also refer to the fact that the very first king of Israel was from the tribe of Benjamin. And that, of course, was King Saul. But it could also, and this is a stretch, I admit, but it could also be a hint at the Apostle Paul, who was also named Saul and was from the tribe of Benjamin. It's almost like Saul started out great. He became a persecutor of David and his followers. And then when Saul, the apostle, comes on the scene in the book of Acts, he starts off as a persecutor of the son of David and his followers. But he becomes a great follower of our King. So, again, I think there's some hints here. But anyways, there's Benjamin, the littlest of them, in the lead. The princes of Judah in their throng, the princes of Zebulun, the princes of Naphtali. Why are these four tribes mentioned? The best guess is that these are the four tribes who participated in the battle that Deborah and Barak led back in Judges chapter 5. And we saw a bit of a hint to that earlier in this psalm. So it could be that this is another echo of that battle. These are the four tribes who were involved, and so here they're being singled out for praise in this Psalm of David. Verse 28, excuse me, summon your power, O God, the power, O God, by which you have worked for us. Because of your temple at Jerusalem, kings shall bear gifts to you. Rebuke the beast that dwell among the reeds, the herd of bulls of the calves of the peoples. The beast that dwells among the reeds is thought to be a hint at Egypt, because a similar language has been used to describe Egypt elsewhere in the scriptures. Trample underfoot those who lust after tribute. Scatter the peoples who delight in war. And now we come to another word that's highlighted in lime green, because this is the only place in the Bible it is found. Hashmonea is the word. Some suggest it means the Hasmoneans. I don't know. It's the only place this word is used. Nobles shall come from Egypt. Cush shall hasten to stretch out her hands to God. And then we come to the glorious closing of the psalm. O kingdoms of the earth, sing to God, sing praises to the Lord. And there's another Selah in the middle of a sentence. To him who rides in the utmost heavens, or literally the heavens of the heavens. Behold, he sends out his voice, his mighty voice. Ascribe power to God, whose majesty is over Israel, and whose power is in the skies. Awesome God from his, and there we find our third occurrence of sanctuary. The first occurrence, Sinai is in the sanctuary. The second occurrence, God is coming with a great parade of musicians and dancers and rejoicers as he comes to his sanctuary. And then it says, awesome God from his sanctuary. And this time it's not Kodesh, it's Mikdash, which is usually translated tabernacle or dwelling place. Awesome is God from his Mikdash, his sanctuary, the God of Israel. He is the one who gives power and strength to his people. Blessed be God. God has come home, and from his sanctuary, surrounded by his bride and those who rejoice in him, he now is ruling the world in majesty, openly, so that people can see him and know him, and the whole world will recognize who he is and who's in control. I think this is the place where every eye shall see him, and how it says that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Messiah is Lord, to the glory of God. Yeah, this day is coming. So at the beginning of the psalm, it's rise up and let your enemies be scattered. And now he's coming home. He's coming home. The world is settling into peace. He's surrounded by his bride, by his people, and he's running the world. And he's restoring Eden to earth. I really hope that we all get past this idea that this world is just something we have to endure until we get out of it. And we get to leave this place and go to heaven. You know, that is not really the message of the Scriptures. The message of the Scriptures is, may your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. God's in the invasion business. He wants to invade the earth with his presence. Not just take us out of it, but for him to come into it. We are like the advanced forces who are here to announce the king's right behind me. Prepare the way of the Lord. And to demonstrate what kingdom life looks like, to be his ambassadors and say the invading forces are right behind me, the king's coming. He wants to bring his kingdom to earth. He wants to restore his image in us. So that really changes the entire way we look at life and at the Scriptures and our entire purpose. So anyways, I'm so glad to have finally gotten through this psalm. You can see how I had to wrestle with this. And you could probably could tell there when I got about halfway, 2/3 through, it's just like, let's just go through it. I didn't pause and comment too much. But it really is a challenging psalm. But what a beautiful and glorious psalm at the same time. So I hope that you found some blessing in this. and that you'll spend some time and just invest some time in this psalm and read it over and over. And remember, it's like an impressionist painting. You have to step back and squint a little bit and the picture comes through. So hopefully Psalm 69 is going to be a little easier to deal with. But until then, I wish you shalom and may God bless.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.
That's all, folks.